Parliament, Honorable Jacob Obama, under your care, and I humbly ask that you restore his servant health again. Above all, grant us the grace to acknowledge your will and know that whatever you do it for the love of us. In Jesus' name I pray and believe. Amen.
Yeah, so we've called the members of the press to brief you on the status of human rights defenders, but also have a conversation on the emerging human rights concerns. There are many sticky issues that concern rights that we felt it's time for us to give our position on those many issues. We have a diverse panel here. I'll ask them to quickly introduce themselves, and then we'll take it up from there.
Thank you. Good morning. You're most welcome to this press conference. My name is Kenneth Chitambula from the Human Rights Center Uganda.
Good morning. My name is Andrew Biaruhanga, and I head Resource Rights Africa, an advocacy and development organization, and our main focus is human rights defenders in the extractive industry.
Good morning. My name is Isabella Akite, and I'm a citizen.
Good morning, Sarah Birete, Center for Constitutional Governance.
Good morning, colleagues. My name is Robert Chirenga, the Executive Director of the National Coalition of Human Rights Defenders Uganda.
Morning, it's Sandra Muguzi, Alliance for Finance Monitoring.
Good morning, I'm Eli Kasirie, Human Rights Defender, a chairperson of Wakiso District Human Rights Committee.
Good morning, I'm Winfred Mugambwa from Rights for Uganda and the Central Point Person for the National Coalition.
Yeah, so I'll invite Mr. Chilenga to start us off. The media, you're most welcome. We'll have the reading of the press statement, and then we'll have comments from each of the panelists. Then we'll take questions, and then we'll have the Uganda reading. So Mr. Chilenga.
Thank you very much, Edward. Once again, I would like to welcome the media. Here is our press statement. Uganda, a call to end the continuous unabated assault on fundamental rights and freedoms of human rights defenders. The National Coalition of Human Rights Defenders in Uganda, with its partners, note with concern the escalation in violation of human rights and the continued disrespect of the rights and freedoms of human rights defenders. Colleagues from the press, we have invited you here today to address you on emerging human rights concerns and developments that negatively affect human rights defenders that deserve urgent attention by the relevant authorities, as we shall indicate in today's press conference. We cannot afford to be passive bystanders and be victims of our circumstances. Human rights defenders are people who make things happen, and it's the choice we make every day. Before we address you on the most pressing emerging human rights issues affecting human rights defenders, I would like to state that civil society organizations derive their legitimacy from Article 38 of the Constitution of the Republic of Uganda, which states that every Ugandan citizen has a right to participate in the affairs of government, individually or through his or her representative in accordance with the law. It further states that every Ugandan has a right to participate in peaceful activities to influence the policies of government through civic organizations. I will now tap on freedom of association and the operation of NGOs. Close to 54 NGOs were suspended last year by the regulator, the NGO Bureau. Today, court will this morning issue its ruling on the matter in which one of our partners, Chapter 4, is challenging the suspension of its operational permit by the Uganda's NGO Bureau. Uganda's NGO Bureau, in our findings, human rights defenders at Crossroads last year is shown to increasingly exert control over NGOs and companies limited by guarantee, by increasing bureaucratic requirements, and more stricter timelines for NGOs. Some of the actions as cited, for example, the Chapter 4 case, are not consistent with the guarantees under the Constitution of the Republic of Uganda, which emphasizes the freedom of association and places strict circumstances under which the freedom can be justifiably limited. In terms of office break-ins, on February 27, 2022, unknown assailants broke into the offices of Community Transformation Foundation Network, commonly known as COTFON, a non-governmental organization that is working to ensure communities in Greater Masaka persons affected by the East African crude oil pipeline project to get their compensation. The network NGO, whose offices are located in Chiwangala Trading Center in Seka Sub-County, Luengo District, coordinates activities that aim at empowering community actors to address the needs of vulnerable and marginalized groups. It adds to a growing list of NGO break-ins that remain inconclusively targeted. Incommunicado detention and the continuous infringement of torture. On December 28, 2022, it's 2021 I think, Kakwenza Rukirabashaija was arrested by members of Uganda's security agencies. Despite a court order calling for his unconditional release on January 4, 2022, he continued being held incommunicado in total disregard of a court order. A subsequent court order issued by the High Court was equally disregarded by the authorities. To date, he is operating in exile. On March 10, 2022, 9 staff on an online digital television known as Alternative Digitox were kidnapped from their offices by UPDF officers and held incommunicado without access to their lawyers or informing their next of kin or relatives, and in the least medical care as the law requires. On the eve of the court issuing an order on March 16, 2022, 7 of the affected staff were let loose, while the other 2 hurriedly arraigned and charged at the Makindye court on charges of cyber stalking and offensive communication. The 9 arrested staff include the following: Mr. Tumuhimbise Norman, the executive director; Mr. Mukose Arnold, who is the programs director; Madam Farida Bikobere, the TV host; Mr. Jeremiah Muchibi, a producer; Mr. Tumusime Kato, in charge of production; Mr. Tudiaha Weroja, in charge of production; Madam Nabukera Teddy Tiango, a presenter; Madam Lillian Luede, a presenter; and Mr. Wabiona JJ Jacob, who is a media intern from the Uganda Christian University. In both cases, we note 3 deeply disconcerting issues: incommunicado detention beyond 48-hour rule, allegations of torture, and disrespect of court orders by officers of security agencies. Officers of court, particularly lawyers and advocates, exercising their right to defend their clients, often find themselves exercising huge personal risk to take on these cases with threats, intimidation, and trailing in some cases. In terms of freedom of expression and opinion, on February 1st, 2022, Uganda police officers at Makere Hill assaulted 2 NBS journalists, namely Eddie Chiseka and Samari Chisache. The journalists were covering an operation by police on border riders, these are commercial cyclists, who are working during curfew time. The Computer Misuse Act 2011 continues to be a source of targeted persecution of human rights defenders. In both cases of Kakwenza Rukirabashaija and the 2 staffers of Alternative Digitox, the charges preferred against them have been either offensive communication or, in some cases, cyber harassment or stalking. As we have stated previously, continued targeted attacks towards journalists stifles the fundamental freedoms of expression and opinion, as most practitioners will opt to self-censor, which is a huge blow to progress previously registered by the government in ensuring that citizens enjoy their freedom of speech, opinion, expression, and thought that constitute the basic tenets of democracy. Environmental human rights defenders, business and human rights. On February 1st, 2022, Total Energies EP Uganda, Sinok Uganda Limited, and the Uganda National Oil Company, and the Tanzanian Petroleum Development Corporation, as representatives of the private sector and the governments of Uganda and Tanzania respectively, announced the final investment decision on the Lake Albert development, which has not only a huge financial dividend to Uganda's economy, but also simultaneously has an impact on human rights and the environment. Despite subtle remarks from President Yoweri Museveni asking local authorities to allow NGOs undertake their work without interference or hindrance, we have credible information that some NGOs continue to be targeted. For example, a FIEGO staff will still report to police in respect to a bond issued as far back as last year on unknown charges to date, and thus undermining their work as a business where they derive livelihood. Land and environmental human rights defenders in the Albertine region particularly are at a grave risk as they continue to face risks and threats due to the nature of the work they are engaged in. The patterns of environmental and human rights violations include threats, arrests, detention, torture, cruel and inhuman degrading treatment, deregistration and suspension of NGOs' operations permit, as well as organizational break-ins, extrajudicial surveillance, among other threats. Access to resources to human rights defenders. As of today, Uganda's largest state and non-state funding entity, the Democratic Governance Facility, remains suspended close to a year and 2 months since its indefinite suspension by the government of Uganda. This has had a sharp incremental effect on legitimate work of particularly NGOs that work every day to advance the rights of communities, inclusive of women, human rights organizations which are pushing to challenge gender-based violence, female genital mutilation, and other cultural practices that affect women, including the provision of legal aid to indigent persons. We now wish to make the following recommendations as civil society. One is to the executive. As Commander-in-Chief of the Uganda People's Defense Forces, we want to initiate an investigation of military officers complicit in recent torture cases as a way to operationalize the presidential directives on torture of civilians by security agencies. Conduct a full and transparent investigation into alleged cases of human rights violations by armed security agencies targeting human rights defenders. Lift the suspension of the Democratic Governance Facility to enable civic organizations and other state actors access resources to empower citizens through the awareness of human rights and promoting good governance. To the Parliament of Uganda, we wish to recommend that they expeditiously table findings of the investigations into widespread allegations of torture, incommunicado arrests, and illegal pre-trial detention against citizens. We urge all the relevant government ministries to promptly and thoroughly and independently investigate all allegations of human rights abuses and violations targeted at human rights defenders. Make a resolution to the effect that all restrictions on fundamental human rights and freedoms be imposed with the oversight of the Parliament of Uganda and the Uganda Human Rights Commission. Appropriate more resources to the Uganda Human Rights Commission and fully constitute its membership to ensure that it effectively discharges its cardinal role towards protection and promotion of human rights. And immediately consider passing the Human Rights Defenders Protection Bill of 2019, which provides for the recognition, legitimacy, and protection of human rights defenders. To the judiciary, we make the following recommendations. To halt the trials of suspected tortured persons appearing before the courts of law and address the human rights issues of such suspects first. Investigate circumstances under which trials of suspects previously held incommunicado are planned expeditiously and held without notifying the suspect's legal representative or the next of kin. To the Uganda People's Defense Forces, we recommend that they conduct a full and transparent investigations into alleged cases of excessive use of force by security agencies, especially when handling joint security operations, including those operating the infamous drone vehicles used to kidnap citizens. To the Uganda Police, we recommend that they exhibit transparency on the operations that happen at the detention facility known as the Special Investigations Branch, SIB Chireka, and make it accessible to citizens who want to check on detainees kept there. In conclusion and moving forward, as a community of human rights defenders and civil society organizations, we are going to have constructive engagements with the three branches of government, that is the executive, the judiciary, and the legislature, on the different aspects highlighted in today's brief, that continuously affect the operations of human rights defenders. I present this for God and my country, and I thank you for your attention, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Robert. We'll take a comment from Sarah. If any of the panelists has an additional comment to make, it's not there, then we'll take questions. I believe Sarah has.
Yeah, thank you very much, Robert, and the members of the press. I just want to add two things. One is that the people perpetrating torture, kidnaps, and other abuses of human rights in Uganda are reversing the clock of this country to the dark days. I know that the president has issued statements, but the office of the president and the titles of Commander-in-Chief and Fountain of Honor is not about writing letters. Torture of citizens is not like a biblical issue of Paulo writing letters to Romans and the Commander-in-Chief appearing to media and saying, I've written. Is he in charge or he is not? The president is vicariously liable to the acts of torture, to the acts of kidnaps, to the acts of other gross human rights abuses conducted under his watch by the security forces that he commands in this country. I call him out to act and not to write letters.
And in the same vein, I think it's important to also be transparent and for once tell Ugandans the truth, because for the longest time we've been deceived that we are living under electoral democracy system. But I think what we are seeing is electoral authoritarianism. I think it's important to also come clean in 2022, going forward, tell Ugandans the truth, because by remaining a bystander and only holding the title of Commander-in-Chief, the President is complicit in these acts that have sent shockwaves of fear and panic in the citizenry. So we are calling upon him to step forward and tell Ugandans what are we living under.
Anybody who wants to submit more? Good, so we could take questions from the media. You could direct your question to anybody here. Any questions, colleagues? Any clarifications you want? With regard to what we have issued, please go ahead.
My name is Chris Makula. I work with Civic. Yesterday, Security Minister Tim Moise, while appearing in one of the committees at Parliament, he said they don't know those guys who are moving in drones, trying to capture the people. What would be your comment about that? If it comes and says they don't know.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chris Makula. As my colleague Sarah indicated, I think the Honorable Minister was just being economical with the truth. Economical with the truth in a sense that he shows that nobody is in charge. If drones are moving in daylight and you're in charge of the security of the country, you've installed cameras all over, you've deployed security forces in all strategic places, the Constitutional Square, roundabouts going into the business city or the central business district, should be able to watch what is happening. These vehicles are in this country, they are not operating in space. Even if they are operating in space, the airspace of the country is respected and it's known. We have radars that can trace them. So in my view, I think the Honorable Minister was just being economical with the truth. They are aware of what is happening, but they know that they are abusing the law and they are not following the law as it should be.
Mr. Semakura, I think that the opportunity MPs missed was the opportunity of asking the Minister of Security whether we have a rebel group to the likes of Boko Haram or Konye kidnapping Ugandans. And if we do so, when will citizens be informed that we are under invasion with a very dangerous rebel group operating drones, kidnapping people, and the state of Uganda has no capacity to protect its citizens?
Any other question?
I want you to give us an update on the issues of DGF. What's the latest? What has been had? Because from what I gather from your sector, it's becoming challenging for you to continue to do your work because of the uneven efforts between the government and the entire discussion that was around DGF. Have you heard from that engagement? What's going on?
Thank you very much, Mr.
Then also, you're calling out the president. Like you said, the president has been on record several times, and he has said he's even going to issue another statement about the very...
He's going to write another letter.
What do you think would be going on? Like you said, he's the commander in chief. There are some people speculating he's no longer in control. What do you think would be going on?
Thank you very much. I'll comment on the DGF. Colleagues, as we have always indicated, the DGF is a funding modality that supports the work of not only human rights defenders or civil society organizations, but also non-state actors, including local governments. The DGF was suspended by His Excellency the President, and he requested certain things be looked into. To the best of our knowledge, the issues he wanted to be looked into in terms of the representation of the board were catered for. The different parties, that is the Minister of Foreign Affairs, the Minister of Justice and Constitutional Affairs, the Minister of Finance, and the development partners sat and had an agreement and agreed on those things. So the one who suspended is responsible for lifting the suspension. And that's why we continuously direct our call to none other than the chief executive of this country, because he's the one who suspended. He needs to lift this suspension. So we continuously call upon him and his office. Maybe his handlers will be able to remind him that you have an obligation to make in terms of lifting this suspension. In terms of the president's continuous call, issuing statements.
What has the implication? What has really been going on?
The implication is that you make now most civil society organizations redundant because they are unable to carry out the programmatic areas in terms of empowering citizens to know their rights, demand, and defend them. Secondly, there are indigenous persons who have been benefiting from this. You are aware that we are in a society where land grabbing is at its peak. Widows, orphans, and other indigent persons who cannot afford lawyers were relying on activities of legal aid from different organizations that receive funding, including the Uganda Law Society, the network of public interest lawyers, the network of legal aid service providers, have been providing legal aid to people who cannot afford lawyers in the courts of law. Right now, they can't do much, and therefore their work has been paralyzed by the fact that someone suspended this funding modality. So it trickles down, but that's not enough. They are livelihoods. Civil society actors have families. The other private sector players, hotels who benefit from the services of civil society organizations, are not getting any income as a result of this suspension. So it has a triple down effect on not only we as civil society, but also citizens who benefit from the services of civil society organizations. In terms of the president, I really don't know, because it's in black and white. As a commander-in-chief, I mean, he calls the shots. And you are also all aware that when the president issues a directive, you must be bold enough to defy a president who is a commander-in-chief. So in my view, I think they're just fooling Ugandans and taking us for a ride. And until we wake up and demand for our rights, it will continue as business as usual. It's high time that we called upon citizens to put our duty bearers, including the president, to hold them accountable and say, what did you promise us when you're making your campaigns in terms of promoting the rule of law and human rights in this country?
Any other question?
Chairman wawakisa ajja tuyambako ku Luganda kubanga mukugu yalusoma ayinamu kakensa w'Oluganda, in other words. Ne statement yonna ayinza ogibajjiramu mu Luganda.
Ffenna tuli wano nga tuvuddeyo okwogera ku nsonga ez'ekutyoboola eddembe ly'obuntu, naddala okutunuulira abantu abo ate abavaayo okulwanirira omuntu wa bulijjo. Era nga tulina ebintu bye tusaba nti abantu abo bali mu buyinza babikoleko bunnambiro okulaba nti ebintu bino ebibadde bityoboola eddembe ly'obuntu mu ggwanga lyaffe bikomezebwa. Ekisooka tusaba Commander-in-Chief owa Uganda People's Defence Force alabe nti wabeerawo okunoonyereza okulaba nti buli muntu yenna oba buli ofiisa we yenna abadde anokoddwayo mu bikolwa bino eby'okutyoboola eddembe ly'obuntu avunaanibwa nga President bwe yavaayo n'atutegeeza mu directive ye. Twagala okulaba nti nno abantu bano bavunaanibwa mu mateeka era baddamu bakola ebibonerezo bye balina okukola. Tusaba wabeerewo okunoonyereza okulabira ddala baani bano abatuusa ebikolwa bino eby'okutyoboola eddembe ly'obuntu ku bannayuganda, era baveeyo balagirwe mu lujjudde tusobole okuba nti nno tubategeera, era kijja kutuyamba nnyo okubeera example ku bantu abo abalala abandyagadde okukola ebikolwa bye bimu. Tusaba Pulezidenti waffe owa Uganda nga bwe yassaawo envumbo ku kitongole ekigabirira obuyambi eri abalwanyizi b'eddembe ekya Democratic Governance Facility, tumusaba aggyewo envumbo eyo, kino kisobole okuyamba ebitongole bino okukola, naye ate okuyambya ddala omuntu owa wansi oyo yali atuukibwako services oba obuweereza obw'ebitongole bino, naddala abo abantu abatasobola kufuna bannamateeka, abantu abo abaali bafuna obuyambi mu kutyoboolwa nga bwe mumanyi nti no waliwo FGM, ebintu ng'ebyo eby'okutyoboola eddembe ly'obuntu. Abantu bangi abaali baganyulwa mu kitongole kino. Twagala okulaba nti nno obuyambi buno butuukira ddala ku bantu ba bulijjo. Kyovola tusaba gavumenti eggyewo envumbo ku kitongole ekyo kisobole okuba nti nno kiweereza obuyambi obwo. Tusaba Paaliyamenti yaffe eya Uganda ebya tocha ebyokutulugunya abantu binoonyerezebwako n'ebifo ebyo abantu gye babateeka eyo ebitali mu mateeka, tusobola okubinoonyerezaako era parliament esobole okutegeera ebifo bino biririddawa. Tusaba ministry wabeerewo okunoonyereza okulaba nti abantu bano abatyoboddwa era abali targeted twagala okulaba nti no ministries ezikwatibwako ku nsonga ezo zikola obuvunaanyizibwa bwazo, naddala ministry ng'eya security, okulaba nti no wabeerawo kye tuyita accountability oba obulambulukufu okulaba nti no ebintu bino bivaayo. Twagala okulaba nti no wabeerawo okwongera okuvujjirizibwa oba okuwa obuyambi ebitongole ebikwatibwako okukuuma eddembe ly'obuntu mu Uganda nga Uganda Human Rights Commission, okulaba nti no eyongebwako ku budget okulaba nti esobola okukola emirimu gyayo, n'ekirala okulaba nti komiti eyo eya Uganda Human Rights Commission etuuza committees, twagala okulaba nti no commission yonna ebeera nzijuvu okusobola okuwuliriza emisango nga gino egy'okutyoboola eddembe ly'obuntu. Tusaba parliament nti mu bunnambiro eyise etteeka waliwo etteeka lye twateeka mu parliament lye bayita Human Rights Defenders Protection Bill 2019. Tusaba parliament ekitwalenga ekintu ekyetaagisa oba ekyobunnambiro okuyisa etteeka lino. Tusaba ne judiciary oba ebitongole ebiramuzi okulaba nti emisango gyonna egiri mu kkooti essaawa eno nga giriko ebyokwebuuza ku tyoboola eddembe ly'obuntu gisooke giyimirizibwe tuwulirize ensonga z'okutyoboola eddembe ly'obuntu ezo. Kubanga mukimanyi bulungi tulina amateeka kati agatufuga nga Human Rights Enforcement Act eragira ebitongole ebiramuzi okuyimiriza emisango gyonna singa wabeerawo okwemulugunya ku kutyoboola eddembe ly'obuntu. So tusaba nti ensonga y'eddembe ly'obuntu zimale okuwulizibwa nga tetunnaba kudda ku misango giri egyawaabibwa. Tusaba ebitongole era ebiramuzi bifengayo nnyo okulaba nti nno abantu bano ababuzibbwawo ne bateekebwa mu bifo ebyo ebitamanyiddwa, abakwatiddwa mu ngeri etategeerekeka, era nga bwe baba baleeteddwa mu maaso gaabwe basobole okuba nti nno basobola okubayambako okufuna balooya oba okufuna abalamuzi oba ababawuliriza ababayambako okuteesa n'okutegeeza ku bantu baabwe ku ki kibaddewo n'okusobola okuba nti no beeyabya. Tusaba Uganda Police nti eyongere okuteekamu obwangu mu kunoonyereza mu nsonga zino ez'okutyoboola eddembe ly'obuntu, n'okirala eveeyo etegeereze ddala abantu bano abantu be bakwata oba abantu baabwe abakozesebwa okutyoboola eddembe ly'obuntu, abakozesa naddala zino emmotoka ze tuwulira drone, bantu baabwe era bava mu bitongole ki, era twagala singa kisoboka zino emmotoka zino ezikozesebwa ng'eza drone zandibadde ziwerebwa abantu ne bakwatibwa mu ngeri etegeerekeka era eruŋŋamizibwa mu mateeka. Tusaba wabeerewo obwenkanya oba obulambulukufu naddala mu bifo ebyo ebiteekebwamu abantu baffe singa babeera bazizza emisango, era nga tunokoddeyo ekifo ekyekireka kye bayita Special Investigation Bureau. Ekifo ekyo twagala tubeere nga wabeerawo obulambulukufu abantu nga bakkirizibwa okukyalira abantu babeera bateekebbwayo, era nga kubanga tubadde tulaba ng'abantu abasinga babasibira mu kifo ekyo tebakkiriza n'abantu baabwe wadde ne balooya baabwe oba bannamateeka baabwe okugendayo okusobola okwogera nabo. Era mu nsonga ezo ffe nga abalwanirira eddembe ly'abo bannaffe ababeera batulugunyizibbwa oba abatyobooleddwa, tetugenda kukoma wano kwogera bwogezi. Twagala okulaba nti nno tuteeka mu nkola oba tuteekawo okuwuliziganya n'okwogerezeganya wakati w'ebitongole bino bye tumenye waggulu ebikwatibwako ku nsonga zino ze twogeddeko waggulu, era nga tugenda kwogerezeganya ne gavumenti oba ekitongole ekifuzi, tugenda kwogerezeganya n'ekitongole ekiramuzi, tugenda kwogerezeganya ne parliament. Tulabe nti nno wabeerawo enkola oba action, kubanga olwaleero tuzze kulaba nti nno wabeerawo ekintu ekikolebwa ddala ku nsonga zino ez'okutyobola eddembe ly'abantu. Twagala tulabe nti n'ebikolwa nga bino bikomezebwa ddala bunnambiro, kubanga tukimanyi nti bwe tuba tukoze ekyo y'engeri yokka gye tuyinza okubeera mu nkola efugibwa amateeka ng'amateeka bwe galagira. Mwebale nnyo, mwebalire ddala.
Nabadde n'ekibuuzo. Minisita w'Obutebenkevu Jim Muhwezi yabadde mu palamenti eggulo n'agamba bakwata abantu tebamumanyi, so balinganga abalinga abatali ba gavumenti. What would be your comment for
in Uganda? Ekintu ekyayogereddwa minisita w'Obutebenkevu nti tamanyi bantu bakwata bantu, kiraga nti nno waliwo okuba nti gavumenti tetuukiriza buvunaanyizibwa bwayo. Buvunaanyizibwa bwa gavumenti okuuma omuntu wa bulijjo n'ebintu bye byonna. So singa minisita avayo n'agamba nti tabamanyi, kitegeeza nti minisita oba tatubuulidde mazima nti abantu bano mbamanyi naye saagala basanguza, oba ekirala nti gavumenti eremereddwa naye tayagadde tubuulira mazima, ffenaffe tutegeere nti oba waliwo abantu oba rebels babayita, waliwo abatuju mu ggwanga abakola ki, abatuzinga edda. So kubanga kati ekyo kimalamu n'essuubi omuntu wa bulijjo. Omuntu wa bulijjo waba yakuwa obuyinza nga gavumenti n'akulonda emyaka 5 ng'olina okumukuuma, naye ate minisita n'ojja n'ogamba nti ate gwe tomanyi kigenda mu maaso, oba omazeemu essuubi omuntu wa bulijjo yakwesiga. So kye twandisabye ti gavumenti etubuulira amazima, oba emirimu gigiremye tusobole okuyiiya ekyokukola, oba tulabe nga constitution bwetuwa amaanyi okulaba nti nno twenyigira mu bintu bino ebyokulwanirira eddembe lyaffe, tulabe engeri gye tuyinza okweyambako nga bannayuganda okulaba nti bannaffe tebatulugunyizibwa nkya naggulo, kubanga ffe obuyinza tubumanyi gavumenti ebulina okusobola okutukuuma n'ebintu byaffe n'abantu baffe.
Maybe kanyongereko eddoboozi lyange. Abaami bano n'abakyala, baminisita n'abakugu ne bano abatukuuma tusaasanya ssente zaffe ez'omumusolo buli mwezi okwasasula emisaala. Bwe babeera ng'emirimu gibalemye baveeyo. Okugeza police drone zino ezoogerwako tezibuukira waggulu nga binyonyi, ziyita ku nguudo baziraba. Drone buli omu ejjo agiraba, lwaki tebaziyimiriza ne balaba ebizirimu? Bayinza batya okubeerawo nga poliisi gye tusasula okubanga ekuuma bannansi okubanga babeera mu butebenkevu, nga abantu bajja ne bawambibwa mu ngeri ekimpatiira ne bagamba tebamanyi gye bali? Obeera otya minisita avunaanyizibwa ku butebenkevu ne weewuguusa n'ogamba tusomanyi bakwate abantu gye bavaawa, bava mu ggulu? So ndowooza babanga emirimu gibalemye boogere nti gibalemye baveeyo, abasobola bakwate ekintu.
Minisita omulamba ow'obutebenkevu okuvaayo n'ayogera ekintu ng'ekyo kimalamu amaanyi, ate kiragira ddala nti tasirwazza batuuze wabula yeesirwazza ye yekka, kubanga wagamba nti tabamanyi kitegeeza nti abamanyi.
akozeewo ki okubeera nti awulira bawulire naye nga tabamanyi. Tusaba bo ng'abakulembeze bave mu kusiruwaza eggwanga n'okwesiruwaza bo bennyini, wabula bakole ekyetaagisibwa. Kubanga twabakwasa eggwanga lyaffe, twabakwasa obulamu bwaffe olunaku lwe baalondebwa.
Yes, please.
It's English.
Oh, no problem. Go ahead. Bring.
Yeah, my name is Salman from The Observer.
Yes.
Yes, we chronicled Kwenza's audio
Yes.
recently, and there is a certain arm of the that's why I picked the press release.
Yeah.
Kwenza mentioned SFC base in Entebbe,
Yes.
which is a home for torture, and when he was released, made mention of the fact that there are quite more Ugandans there, still at the base, who are undergoing high levels of torture. I think you should make comment, because eventually, even though SFC has a new commander, there's a de facto commander of the SFC. I think the National Coalition should come straight and send their voice straight to the commander of the SFC.
So the unfortunate bit is that our leadership continues to fool us, and I don't think we should continue to accept it. It is to insult your intelligence to say that there are no detainees at SFC. As civil society organizations, of course, you know that we do not have the mandate to inspect. The constitutional mandate to inspect detention places lies with the Uganda Human Rights Commission. It has the powers to inspect all detention places and make recommendations to Parliament on how best detainees can be handled. So we are calling upon the Uganda Human Rights Commission to make use of its constitutional powers. It is a quasi-court. It can make orders for the release of any person that satisfies them that is illegally detained. So we call upon the chairperson and our commissioners to make use of those constitutional powers and order release of any persons who are illegally detained in these facilities. Of course, it goes also back to the call to the commander-in-chief of the armed forces in this country, that he can preside over the Special Forces Command and ask them to unconditionally release any detainees that they are holding indoors. Because this does not actually promote the image of this country. It makes negative connotations when you hear people are being detained in military detentions, where the Constitutional Court or the people has made it clear that civilians should not be detained in military facilities or even tried in military tribunals.
And I think I can add on before Sarah comes. Article 44. Sorry, I will stick with it because I have a bit of a cold. I don't want my neighbor. Article 44 of the Constitution has what we call the non-derogable rights. That a citizen has these rights given to them by God even before the Constitution gives it to them. And that the Constitution now recognizes that nobody can take these ones away. Fundamental of those rights is the right to a fair hearing. How many of those people who are in these detention centers have had a fair hearing? How many of those people have been produced before courts of law within the 48 hours? So safe houses are as illegal as it were, but we are going to use our coalition here, where we are seated, to document which ones are present, which ones are active, which ones are inactive, and we shall do an analysis which we shall again take to the institutions. Uganda Human Rights Commission will receive an analysis from us, and that analysis will help them to take steps forward. I just want to add two things. One is that Entebbe is the official residence of the President of Uganda. The second issue is that SFC is a unit meant to protect the president and his family members. It's not even mentioned in the UPDF Act. It has nothing to do with citizens of Uganda that are not members of the president's family. The first IPOD meeting after elections that happened at Kololo, the president is on record to have admitted that he has seen some of the people allegedly kidnapped in State House and they are there for rehabilitation. I hope as media you remember that statement. That was an admission that the president knows about kidnaps, and he also knows about illegal detentions, and he also knows about missing persons in Uganda and those held incommunicado, including in his residence. I call upon Ugandans and other several people that were tortured and kidnapped. They have families, they have relatives, and these are amongst us. You must reject these acts.
Awo eri kadde tuyambe eri awo.
Let's Sarah repeat
Abidde
it in
alumanyi
Uganda.
aya Sarah nawe
Repeat
yiya.
it in Uganda how it was said.
Ayolezia musajja kabaka tezino omukyala wa kabaka. So no
Because the kahuje is too much.
Entebe gye twogerako kye kitebe ekikulu eky'omukulembeze w'eggwanga gy'asula ne gy'akolera emirimu gye. Amagye ge twogerako aga SFC tegali mu constitution, tegali mu tteeka ly'amagye lye tuyita UPDF Act. Ke kawundu k'amagye akaateekerwawo okukuuma president n'ab'amaka ge. Tegayina bizinesi yonna ku bannayuganda nga si b'amaka ga president. Olukuŋŋaano lwatuula olwa IPOD nga tuvudde mu kaluulu lwatuula Kololo. President yayogera nti alina abantu balabye mu maka ge abo be bagamba nti babuze. Nti naye bagendayo bali ku rehabilitation. Kati ekyo kiraga nti emivuyo egiri mu ggwanga egy'okubuza abantu, egy'okutokyalinga, egy'okukidnappinga, president agimanyiiko. Ate yakulembera ebitongole bya security mu Uganda yonna, ye command in chief. Ffe nga bannayuganda saagala tubeeraawo tugambe nti kino kituuse ku Kakwenza, kino kituuse ku Norman, olowooze nti gw'oli safe. Abantu abaabula mu kaluulu balina b'amaka gaabwe, balina ab'Oluganda, balina gye bava, era bava mu ffe ng'abantu. Nze mbakubira omulanga bino eby'okubabuzaabuza ne bababulira ebintu ebitaliimu mubigaane, mwerwaneko mununule eggwanga lyammwe.
Any other question?
I think we are done.